In this video, we're going to talk a little bit about inflation. Inflation is the effect where the price of goods and services over time goes up. So an example of this is in the 70s, the early 70s, a litre of petrol cost 10 cents. Today, in 2017, a litre of petrol now costs anywhere from $1.20 up to $1.50. Now, it's not that petrol has somehow become more valuable today than it was back in 1972. What's actually happened, or what economists say has happened, is that the value of money has decreased. What we used to be able to buy for 10 cents now would get us less than 100 millilitres of petrol. So we need to spend more money to be able to purchase the same thing. So the value of money going down means that we need to spend more of it to purchase the same thing. And of course this has the effect that we notice of the prices going up, or prices inflating. So when the price of goods goes up over time, this effect we call inflation. So we call this inflation. The rate at which prices go up over time is called the inflation rate. And if we know what the rate of inflation is, and what the starting value, the present value of an item is, it's possible for us to work out what its value will be at some point in the future. For example, in 2017, the rate of inflation in Australia is approximately 3%. So if we were to purchase 100 litres of petrol today, it would cost $130. If we wanted to predict what the price of petrol would be in a year's time, using a rate of inflation of 3%, so we're going to express that as a decimal. In 1 year from now, we could use the future value formula which of course is very similar to what you're familiar with from appreciation and depreciation. So in this case, we're trying to find what the future value will be. We know that the present value of 100 litres of petrol is $130, and we want to know what that will be in 1 year time. So we can pop that in our calculator. And we get $133.90. So if the rate of inflation is 3% and 100 litres of petrol costs $130 today, then in 12 months from now, 1 year's time, we can expect that same 100 litres of petrol to actually cost $133.90. In a similar way, we can work backwards. If we know that the rate of inflation, so this is a second example, if the average rate of inflation over the past 5 years is equal to 3.5% and a house purchased this year cost $250,000, and we want to find out 5 years ago what the value of the house would have been. We can use our inflation formula to calculate what that value will be. When we're using this formula, it's really important to understand which is the future value and which is the present value. In this case, we've got a timeline in effect. We've got the 2017 price of $250,000, and we're trying to find out what the 212 price is. Now we need to work out which of these prices is the present value and which is the future value. Sometimes those terms present and future can be confusing. What we should think about when we're thinking about the present value and the future value is the present value should be the earliest value and the future value should be the latest value. And if we think about them in those terms, then it's clear that the earliest value on our timeline for this question will actually be the 2012 value. That's the value that we're looking for, and that the future value, the latest value, will be our 2017 value. So it's clear in this question we are actually going to need to rearrange this equation to get an expression for the present value. So we'll select the correct formula. We'll then substitute into our formula our values. So the future value is 250,000. 1 plus 0.035 to the power of 5. And then we'll solve to see that in 2012 a house that cost $250,000 today would have been worth $210,000 493 5 years ago. So if we were purchasing this house 5 years ago, we could have expected to have paid $210,493 for the house. Now, that's how we use the inflation formula to calculate the future and past values when we're given the inflation rate. Another way that economists deal with inflation is to use what's called the Consumer Price Index. The Consumer Price Index is really a number which allows us to determine by how much the price of goods and services across our economy has increased over the course of each year. So the Consumer Price Index gives an indication by comparison of the amount by which prices have gone up. For example, if the Consumer Price Index in 2016 was 187 and in 2017 it was 193, then we can see that the price of goods and services have gone up. But what we are interested to find out is how much have the price of goods and services gone up by during the course of that 1 year. So what we want to know is what was the rate of inflation over the period of this 1 year. So in order to work that out, what we'll do is we'll use a formula. The rate of inflation can be calculated by subtracting the early CPI from the late CPI, dividing that by the early CPI and multiplying by 100%. So what I mean by the late and the early CPI is the 2017 CPI comes later than the 2016 CPI. So what we'll do is we'll work out what that is. So the late CPI in this case is 193, the early CPI is 187, and we'll divide that by 187 and multiply by 100% to get a percentage. So what we'll get there is 193 minus 187, and then we'll divide that by 187, multiply by 100, and we get 3.21%. So what these consumer price index numbers tell us, if these were the numbers, would be that over the course of this 12-month period, the rate of inflation was 3.21%. And we could then use that rate of inflation to calculate how much the price of goods and services have gone up by. And that's the consumer price index.